Chew everybody, Coach Rab here, and today I'm going to be discussing a little bit about running or using running for fitness. Now, running is not necessarily for everyone, but where there's a will, there's a way. Everybody can get into it if they have the desire to do so. Now, historically, humans have always ran around. Ran very, very large distances. We would chase down herds of animals, not with pure speed, but with relentless stamina, constantly pursuing these animals, particularly in warmer climates, that they then had to, a lot of these animals have to pant to cool down. And when, age-old man were chasing down these animals, they were not getting a chance to rest. It's all they had to do was keep them on the horizon. And the herd would be like, oh, looking back, they're still coming, they're still coming. Now, we didn't have the speed to catch them, but ultimately we kept pursuing them to the point where they would become very, very weak and exhausted purely from the heat and the inability to cool down, making them prime targets for us and our spears. Now, we don't necessarily have to do that in this day and age. However, a lot of us choose to run for fitness, for health, for well-being, and for mental health too. Now, it's very important when you're starting out running to take into a few considerations. The first one I always say to people is think about the terrain that you're going to run on. Okay, hard ground, much like the paths and roads and pavements that we're likely going to use, is quite unforgiving on joints. So where possible, you want to choose your routes wisely that has softer terrain. Now, with softer terrain, there is then the issue that there might be slips, trips, or falls, or more of them. So you have to be very, very careful where you choose. But where possible, especially when you start thinking about upping the mileage, think about the terrain. Nutrition-wise, you want to be thinking about ensuring your diet is high in anti-inflammatories. You think about running itself as quite impactful on both the joints and the muscles. Okay, you're running, and again, as you're upping the mileage, you might want to be making sure that after each run you're getting plenty of foods that are going to help with reducing inflammation. Even making use of cold therapy after a run, getting into a cold bath or cold water to reduce inflammation and speed up recovery. Some of the more advanced things you can do nutrition wise is playing around with carbohydrates, looking into arginine. Arginine is an amino acid that helps with oxygen uptake in the red blood cells, so that can also help overall stamina. Now, sometimes people ask, what do I take with me on a run? Now, when you're going for a run, it all depends on how far you're planning to go. If you're only going a couple of miles, you don't have to concern yourself with extra carbohydrates. You could probably get away with going without a water bottle, although it's better to always take hydration with you just in case. But in the shorter distances, you certainly do not need to concern yourself with any form of carbohydrate boost. When you start getting into the longer runs, and we're talking 10, 12, 13 miles, okay, that's when you want to start thinking about, right, maybe you want to take a little bit extra sustenance with you. So up to about 10K, not 10 miles, you don't really need to concern yourself. You should have enough energy stores on your body to get around that. But when you get into the higher range of the mileage, if you're working towards a half marathon, you might want to start thinking about taking things with you. Now, historically, runners used to take things like jelly beans, Skittles, sort of simple sugars to get you a bit of a rush. More recently, it's the sort of common practice to take honey. And, if you get a nice honey pouch, taking honey with you, because honey is a disaccharide, so it will give you a sugar burst, give you the sweetness, but it doesn't create so much of an insulin spike. Now, when you're running, you don't necessarily want to be creating insulin spikes. You want to be giving yourself enough sugar that you're going to use, but not too much sugar that you're going to upset your blood sugar balance. And that takes me on to the next point, which is quite important, is when you're choosing your hydration, when you're running, you want to think about hydration purely from an electrolyte perspective. Now, if on the shorter runs, you would just need water. On longer runs, and if you're in hot climates, you might want to be ensuring you're getting enough electrolytes. Now, some of these sports drinks, you've got to be very, very careful that it's a sports drink and not an energy drink, and there is a difference. Sports drinks are typically isotonic, meaning that the sugar content in there isn't going to manipulate the blood level or the blood sugars too much. An energy drink is packed with glucose. If you're gulping that down, that gets to the bloodstream quite quick and creates an insulin spike, and you can end up getting dizzy because insulin will push all the sugar out the blood into the muscles, and then you'll end up with low blood sugar mid-run. You're like, oh, getting dizzy and feeling a bit faint. So make sure energy drinks are a no-no whilst running. Make sure your drink is isotonic. Fail-safe is water with electrolytes, and then if you then take something like honey with you or your go-to to give you a bit of energy around, then great. Other people have swore by taking complex carbohydrates like oat bars and flapjacks and just nibbling on them, because the complex carbohydrates will give you some energy and give you slow release energy, which is what you want. Post-race or post-large runs, as I mentioned before, you want to be thinking about cold therapy. So if you can bear it, get yourself into cold as quickly as possible to reduce inflammation. Remember, inflammation is your body's overreaction to the stimulus. You've been exercising hard, you've been pounding on the joints, the muscles for a long period of time, and then at the end of it, you could be swollen. Your body then tries to protect itself. Now, that extra inflammation will actually slow down your recovery period. So that's why athletes typically get into ice baths, or some marathon runners have those ice suits, the suits that have, I guess it's water stored throughout that's frozen. You want to get your body temperature cooled as quickly as possible. That will help. Some runners also swear on post-nutrition being a bag of salt and vinegar crisps. Now, whilst nutritionally not the best thing in the world, you've just ran a half marathon or full marathon or whatever, you'll probably get away with a bag of them. They swear by them for recovery because they'll give you the salts in there as well as some carbohydrates, some fats. Not the best sources of fats, let's face it, it's trans fats, but again, that's some of the go-tos. Otherwise, you want to get some complex carbohydrates in, some fats, and a little bit of protein later on. But ultimately, rehydrating at the end of a run is one of your most important things. Now, to improve your overall running, the natural thing is to run further, right? We set off, we say, right, how far can we go? Now, whenever I'm working with somebody on a running program, the first job I say is let's just count the number of stops. Now, if you're a seasoned runner, you might have little to no stops. But if you're brand new to running, you can expect that you're going to have to stop. Now, a stop might just mean that you stop from running into and break into a walk, and then you start running again when you're ready. That is completely normal. And what you do is you just count the number of stops on your first run, and then on your next run, you try to equal or beat the number of stops. So if you took 6 stops the first time, then your next run, you think to yourself, you know what, I want to try and get around the same route in 5 stops, then 4 stops, and eventually build up to do no stops. Then depending on whether your goal is to compete or complete when it comes to your running, your goal might just be to complete. Therefore, you don't necessarily have to concern yourself with time. But if you want to compete for a specific time slot, then you'd want to start timing yourself and working harder. Now, another thing that can come in really, really handy for your distance running is including some speed work. Okay, so doing some sprint work will work the anaerobic energy system and ultimately improve your overall running pace. People say, I can't sprint. Oh my God, I couldn't do this. I remember years ago, there was a lady that we worked with and she'd never run a 5K before. The North Inch in Perth is 1.5 miles round, so twice round is a 5K, 3 miles. And what we did was we went jogging. Now, our jogging pace, she was starting to get to that same panic that we all experience where we've either never run before or we're just starting back. You've broken into run, it's certainly faster than your walking pace, and you've got that feeling in your chest that, you can't breathe, everything becomes a bit much, everything becomes heavy. And what we said, right, the next bench, we're going to sprint to that bench. And the lady's like, whoa, right, go. So we sprinted to the bench at her sprint pace. Then when we hit the bench, we broke back into a jog. So then on the jog, she's trying to catch her breath, and she's like, and then on the next bit, once we thought she was ready, let's sprint to the next bench. And the interesting thing that happens is that the sprint becomes the uncomfortable bit and the jog becomes easy. And she got round that without stopping. And she was like, oh my, we said, you've now run a 5K. And she's like, I can't believe this. I cannot believe this. And that's because you've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, when you first go into running, The running is more than your walking. Walking could be comfortable to you. The running is uncomfortable and it's like a panic. When you start introducing sprints, the sprints become the uncomfortable and all of a sudden the running part becomes bearable. So including some sprint training into your routine is important. You can use things like speed ladders. So as part of my running program I have on my app, I utilize a dynamic routine that uses speed ladders. Now speed ladders activate all the fast twitch fibers in the legs, and then further on in the program we do introduce sprints. So I'll showcase a bit of that in this video today. But introducing speed work into your routine is very, very important. So overall, if you're never ran before or you're thinking about getting running back to fitness, you set off, you want to think about terrain first. Make sure where possible you're going to be running on soft terrain, right? You then also want to have a good stretch routine. You want to make sure you're stretching the hamstrings and calves and also making use of foam rollers if you can. Remember that running will shorten muscles, especially around the calf area, because every time you hit the ground, the impact, the footfall, your calves will get tight. So you want to be stretching them out at least 2 to 3 times a day, and certainly before and after running. Okay, you do that, you'll prevent injuries further down the line. So you need a stretch routine. Nutrition wise, you want to be thinking about anti-inflammatories in the diet to deal with the impact. You might want to think about some cold therapy as well. You want to then further down the line start introducing some sprint work, getting the different energy systems working and embracing a little bit of discomfort as well. And then if you do plan to run larger distances, then you might want to be thinking about in-run nutrition, taking carbohydrates with you, energy to keep you going throughout. Now, if you are interested in starting running, you can download my app. I've got a very basic starting running plan. This running plan is a one-size-fits-all. It's delivered over 6 weeks, but it has a training schedule for anybody that's going on to half marathon and full marathon, so it's got the full thing. But if you're starting from absolute ground zero, it will build you up to a 5K quite quickly. It's got dynamic routine in there, speed ladder work, it then introduces sprints, it has some threshold running as well, bit of nutrition, bit of mindset, and then there's a lot going on over in my Facebook group at the moment to do with everybody getting round their first morning mile with the equivalent of a run. So if you are interested, either drop me a message or you can head to my website, coachrab.com, get the links to my app there, get it downloaded, get subscribed, get involved. Hope this helps. Take a breath, it's summer, summer.